To call the meeting to order. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, flag in the back of the room. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Recognition comments from the chair. Just a couple of comments. Although he's not here yet, hopefully he will join us. We do have a new student representative, a junior, Hayden Plattner, not here. We are expecting him, so hopefully he'll get here during the meeting. And the other note I'd like to make, we did change the location for this meeting from Phippsburg to Morse because of the presentation on the ALICE safety approach that we intend to take in the middle school and high school. It seemed more appropriate to have the meeting up here than down in Phippsburg. But I do want to reassure you Phippsburg folks and you, particularly Bill, that we will schedule a meeting down in Phippsburg. So we haven't forgotten you down there for sure, and we'll catch you later in the year. Item 4.0, approve or amend the meetings for September 17th. Any comments? Okay, we have a motion by Bill. Do I have a second? Second. Okay, second by Lou. Any comments? Corrections? Just as kind of as a follow-up, we did when we approved the policy on extracurricular activity participation, we did the question on whether vaping or e-cigarettes came up, and if you're
it's covered under the back.
It is covered. Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments? If not, all in favor of accepting the minutes as presented? Any opposed? No? Thank you. Item 5.0, adjustments to the agenda. We do have need for an executive session at the end of the meeting, and it's going to be to discuss a legal issue. So the executive session will be called pursuant to 1 MRSA 405, Section 6, Paragraph E, which relates to legal rights and duties of the school unit. So we will let's make that item 14, or excuse me, item 14.2 will be the executive session. And we do not intend to take any action after the session, so for those in the audience, if you don't want to stay around, that'll be fine. Okay, item 6.0, public session. This is an opportunity for folks in the audience to comment on items on the agenda. The one I just want to point out that when we get to 8.0, the staff report, we will be taking questions from the public and the board during that presentation. So if you have questions related to 8.0, if you could just hold those for a while. But are there any other comments, questions that anyone in the public wants to make at this point? If not, okay, thank you. 7.0, student recognition. Patrick?
Recently, we were fortunate to have 2 of our students in the district be recognized as a Bath Youth Citizen Award. And so we thought it would be appropriate to have them come tonight. Unfortunately, our senior could not make it tonight because of another commitment, and you'll understand why. She's kind of a busy person. She's involved in a lot of different things. But I do want to recognize her first. She's not here tonight, but it's May Winglass. And just give you a brief overview so you can understand why she received this deserving award. But she's a senior class president, also involved in Shipbuilders Committed, Youth Education and Sports Day, and Youth Leadership Day, Morse All Sports Boosters, and Pies for Polio. And she's a three-sport student athlete, and she also gives back through the unified sports programs, especially being very active in the unified basketball program that we started last year. So very pleased to have May Winglass be that recipient. I know it was in the paper recently. And then we had a middle school student that also received the award, and Addie Hines is here tonight, and she's going to give a little brief presentation on some of the work that she's been doing at BMS. But before she does that, Addie, you're 12, right? And I got to know Addie a little bit at the Set for Success event that we had in August, and I just went away saying, oh my, very mature young lady for 12. And very, so just a couple things about her: a strong advocate for her peers at BMS and trying to prevent youth suicide. Guiding the Yellow Tulip Hope Garden and contributing to Set for Success, as I mentioned. She's also active in the Kindness Club and the Wellness Club at BMS and assisted with organizing Kindness Day. So Addie, thank you for being here. Congratulations. And if you don't mind coming up to the mic and kind of explaining some of your work. Thanks.
Here we go. Hi. As Mr. Manuel said, I am Addie Hines, and I'm a 7th grader at BMS. And this year, I started the first ever Hope Garden planting at BMS. So I was inspired to start this project after I realized, since joining the Midcoast Community Alliance, which is a suicide prevention group in Bath, that a lot of times when we think of suicide prevention and mental health issues, we look at high schoolers, and above that, when really we should be looking at middle schoolers and even like 4th and 5th grade elementary school students. So I decided to start this project this year, and we had an amazing turnout with a lot of support from Jamie and the rest of the Alliance and a lot of staff members at BMS. We had a really good student turnout. We had about 30, maybe 35 students come, and then we also had a lot of public members come, and it was awesome. So yeah.
Okay, thanks, Addie. Before you sit down, you already sat down. I just wonder, any questions or comments from the board? I mean, we're very, always, from a school board perspective, I think we're very proud of the accomplishments of our students, and I think this is a terrific initiative on your part, and really apropos really to our next item, which is, you know, the ALICE training. I mean, I think we're all concerned about mental health issues and suicide prevention as it affects our students, and how, you know, the link of that to other community factors, but the link of that to violence that we sometimes experience in the schools. So I think what you're doing and the initiative you've taken is not only it's not only great, but it's very timely, and I'm going to say we appreciate it. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you.
Anybody want to make any other comments? No? Okay.
I just have a quick question. When because there was other gardens, right? One had been done at Morse, and then so did you get the idea from that, or I wasn't sure how it came about that you thought you were to get involved?
So in the Midcoast Community Alliance has a meeting the last Tuesday of the month, and in our August meeting, Jamie mentioned the Morse planting and suggested that we do it at BMS. So I kind of took that into action like 5 days before school started. I frantically emailed like every teacher. But yeah.
That's great. Thanks for taking that initiative.
Who weeds the garden? There you go. There you go. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, item 8.0 is staff report. Chuck Reece, there he is going to give a presentation on ALICE training protocols. We will take questions as we go along from the board and from, from the public for sure. I want to thank Chief Fields and Sheriff Mary are here tonight, and I do want to appreciate you, both of you, for being here to participate in this discussion. We're here to get information at this point and to walk through the plan. The board isn't anticipating any action tonight. We'd like to hear. Oh, there's comments coming through the speaker. We're interested in hearing comments from the public and certainly the presentation that Chuck's going to do on this. There may be some action required at a future meeting. We're going to look at our policy as it applies to this kind of training and activities that we do in the board, but we're not sure what at this point what action might be required by the board. So, with that said, Chuck. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I just want to say a few things before Chuck goes, that this is an important presentation, but the ALICE approach is just one component of our total crisis plan. So before Chuck goes, I just want to go over a few things because, again, this is one component, and I think we've done a lot as a district to be proactive instead of being reactive, and I just want to mention some of those things. And I'll go quick because I know then Chuck's on. But safety security upgrades in 2014 with the bond, reestablishing an SRO. Mike, I can't remember if that was 5 or 6 years ago now, but we lost it for a while, and that's been very important. Increased social work, guidance, and staff and health education over the last 5 years, thanks to the support of the board. Behavior support programs, pre-K to 12 in all of the districts. Professional development on suicide prevention, and also the youth mental health first aid that a lot of our staff have received. Mid-Coast Community Alliance, who's here tonight, has been a tremendous resource for students and for staff and the community in general. Age-appropriate work that we do with our students around safety, the drills we practice each year, close collaboration that we have with law enforcement, fingerprinting background checks that we do on all of our employees and volunteers and substitutes, and then also the recent safety and security upgrades that we did this past summer, which included panic buttons, different types of locks, different type of glass, and also numbering outside of our windows and doors. Threat assessments, reunification planning when we have to evacuate a building, emergency kits, and Knox boxes for the police to be able to get into our buildings if they have to, as well as all the police cars have a swipe key to the building as well as plans to our buildings. So again, we're trying to be proactive, and this is an approach different than what we're used to in some schools where we would, when it comes to an active shooter, and I'm going to turn it over to Chuck, but it's a different approach that Chuck as a trainer brought it to our administrative team last year, and we felt it had merit, so we, on the last day of school last year, we put our staff through some training, and that's where we're at this point right now. So Chuck? Thank you.
So I received my training through ALICE, actually over in Brunswick. One of the officers that I went through with is here with me today, which is Tom Stanton. I've worked closely with Tom as I rolled this out because Brunswick has been doing this as well in their region. Mount Ararat's getting ready to do it as well. You may see Randy Cook walk in late. He's the SRO at Mount Ararat. And this is a very brief introduction. And I understand it's going to leave you with questions because this is 20 slides in about 10 minutes, and it's really a 45-minute to an hour presentation. So I would expect that you guys are going to have more questions and answers through these slides. But as I go down through, I will be going back and forth just because of the way it's set up. I apologize for that. It kind of makes me look a little disorganized. But so the Citizen Response to a Violent Intruder, ALICE acronym, stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. It's not linear, and it can be at any stage you can change, and wherever you are in that can be what you do. So it doesn't have to be ALICE in that order. ALICE is based on premise that the information authorization and proactive training are the key to surviving the active shooter. So the alert is all authorized to announce and there are no codes used. It's one of the biggest things, not to use a code so that everyone understands what's going on. It's plain language. Lockdown must include barricade because locks can and have been defeated. It makes you a harder target. Inform, use technology to give the best information at the most current time. Counter, interrupt the skill set needed for someone to shoot or to even just engage in their attack accordingly. You've got to change what's happening in their head. If they expect you to lay down and all you do is lay down, you're changing nothing in their head to change what their actions are. To evacuate, get away from the danger if possible. That last one is the key one, and that's the one that I really want to make sure you guys understand that can be used on the first stage. Passive versus proactive response strategies. Why is citizen preparation proactive response necessary? So 25 years of mass shooting events have yielded the national average for response time for law enforcement. I'm just going to tell you, I'm not going to ask you the question, it's 5 to 6 minutes. Bath is it's closer to 2. 14 years of passive response strategies. Just remember, it's passive response. It's just doing the lockdown alone strategy. With Columbine, there were 12 wounded, 10 killed. Virginia Tech, 17 wounded, 30 killed. Sandy Hook, 2 wounded, 26 killed. So 54 students stayed for 5 minutes in Columbine in the library when the active targets, the active threat was out front, glass windows, shooting through the windows, and they never left. I'm going to kind of answer this. The reason why they didn't leave is because that's not how they were trained. Also, the librarian, not to her fault, they were trained to get under the desk, to stay down, to wait for law enforcement to show up. But the problem with that is, with that all happening, if you look back at this slide, what you can see closely is an exit. And they had an exit the whole time. They could have gotten out. That's part of the evacuate. Part of understanding in the training, changing from just lockdown to stay in the room, to understanding that evacuation is always, if you have that as an option, that should be your first priority, is to get out and get away from the threat. So this, I'm going to describe really quickly. It's a video showing the lockdown on the board. Do we have anybody that I should describe the lockdown to in more detail? Lockdown basically is to get out of the line of sight from the door, lock the door, get down, be quiet, turn the lights off, close the shades. And a big part to that is, why we're bringing that up is, if they're going to make entry to that room, we need to do more. That's why the barricade part comes in. They talk about how you can't just lock down. You need to barricade. You need to make that room as hard of a target as possible. Why we need to know more. This is talking about all the different attack resolutions that have happened. It's an NYPD research on it, and it talks about 202 incidents, and it goes over how 86% on the first sign of resistance or law enforcement or active something outside of what they were prepared for is what stopped the event, whether it be by actual force of someone there or by force by law enforcement, the sound of sirens, the fact that they couldn't actually execute their plan. That all can stop that event. Changing what they're expecting. This is talking about, the little quick hint is, who do we hope is committing this first act? And this is going to kind of lay it out. The casualties by category since 1966. Talks about police resolved, and it shows the casualties way up. It's because of the amount of time. How much time has gone by in reference to if it was resolved by the victims. So say someone in this room, it was happening right now, we'd be considered victims, but we'd act, and we could stop the threat immediately. Or if someone who is an adult was able to take that person by surprise. I mean, if you've been following at all in the news the past 5 years, you hear of teachers doing this. You hear of coaches doing this. You hear of common citizens doing this. That's why that quick response can change everything and can bring your casualty rates just down to the floor. The shooter resolved is not as low as victim. With this, if it's a goal to mitigate casualties, the resolution is we need the first person who realizes that it's a threat to mitigate that casualty if they're so capable. Department of Homeland Security recommendations, October 2008, known as the 3 outs program: get out, hide out, take out. The words are different, but it's still the same idea as Alice. International Association of Chief of Police recommendations 2009 do not have a one-size-fits-all plan. All teachers choose to evacuate or lock down. Authorized decisions to be made, and it says at the last thing, active resistance is an option. That would be the last option. As in Alice, if you think about it, if you can evacuate, that's your first option. You want to get out. If the threat's so close that you can't get out, that's why we say to barricade, to make that locked door even harder to get into. Buy yourself time, buy us time to respond. That's what we're looking for. And if the worst case and the worst imaginable thing happens and they're able to make entry to that room, just as simple as picking up your pen and throwing it at somebody is going to change their eyes. They're not going to be able to focus on their target as well, and it'll actually up your ability to survive and other people in the room's ability to survive. Noise, movement, distractions. Those three things, whether done at a high rate that this big guy could do, or whether it was done by the 12-year-old girl, it can change anything. Because if you change my eyes, I can't stay on target. It's going to change the outcomes. NYPD recommendations, January 2012, 2013. Same words again. Evacuate, hide, take action. Alabama Government Homeland Security, February 2013, specifically names Alice and Run, Hide, Fight as the official state recommendations for active shooter response plans. Ohio Attorney General and Safety Task Force recommendations, June 2013. Lockdown does not mean standalone defensive strategy of securing in place. They want you to evacuate, barricade, and counter for staff and students. U.S. Department of Education, June 2013. Has to be the end of lockdown only a school response plan for schools. Then it asks, are our plans in agreement with these recommendations or contrary? The usual opponent concerns, there could be more than one shooter. 98% of the time, 98% from what we can go back to in history, have been a single lone shooter. They could run into the shooter if they evacuate. If you stay in the room and all we do is lock down, the casualties are going to be enormous. We've got to do something different. How will we account for those who left? It's going to be a lot easier for us to be able to get out after the situation is contained, after it's done, and we can go find the kids. It's a lot better than us going back to them and saying, this is our number. These are how many kids we have that are expired. Small children aren't capable. Small children, or I'm going to put it in with also special ed. If we're not able to be able to run, to be able to get out, then we need to be prepared to barricade. We need to be better at barricade. There's going to be situations where we can't evacuate. I understand that. But we can always start to think on how can we make this room harder to get into. Rally point could be secondary attack location. That's why your rally points are public areas. They're places where people are at all the time. So if something's out of place, something's wrong, something's being done that's out of the ordinary, someone's going to pick up on it. Evacuating folks will get in the way of police. We're trained for that. Also, when you evacuate folks, if you can train to do certain areas, certain ways, you know, if you're going to cross from Lincoln Street to Academy, or if you're going to go from Chestnut across to Andrew, we just need to be aware of that. We know that those are points where people are going to egress. Our awareness of that is going to help us. Same thing with different schools. How will police distinguish friendlies from the shooter if they get the gun away? One of the things I talk to the teachers about is what's one thing that almost every classroom has. It's rare for them not to have one. The trash can. Just flip the trash can over, put it over the top of the gun. You don't have to pick up the gun. You can hold that person down, get it away from them. If you can't, and that person's actively able to get up, you put it in the trash can and you go. There's a big difference between someone holding a gun like this and someone actually closed fist, anger, engaged. It's a big, big difference. Counter strategies are ridiculous. Some things, although they may be ridiculous, may buy us time. And they may create a distraction that can cause someone's ability to be able to actually finish this or to engage in this act. And it can cause for them to have time lapse so they're not able to engage in that. It could actually take them out of their, some people have called it a trance when they're actively in this. And if you change what they're doing, you change what they expected, it could stop the whole action right there in its tracks, taking them out of that. It may sound ridiculous, but I would much rather change what we're doing than keep going with where we are. And I'm sure you guys have questions. because that was pretty quick. One of the things that I just want to
Chuck,
hit on.
can you just explain where the lockdown kind of came from?
So lockdown originated from everything that we can go back on, which what I was trained with Alice, is it originated for drive-bys out west in LA. And the idea is it's going to be quick, 30, maybe 45-second, possibly gang-related drive-by where they're just kind of shooting at the school because it's turf wars. And when you get inside, you can get below that concrete wall, and you'll be safe because you're down below it. The problem is with active shooters and violent intruders is they're not looking to just spray. They're not looking to just shoot from the outside. They're actively trying to get into the school. That's a completely different task than what they were designed lockdown for. Lockdown was for a threat that was never going to enter the school. It was going to be stopped outside. They would continue going by. We have these threats coming into the buildings. It's completely different.
Any questions from the board at this point? Questions from anyone in the audience? I have a couple. I mean, Alice, has not been. I can't reference the specific sources, but folks have been critical of the Alice protocol. And can you address that?
I could talk about one of them that I remember during training. They talked about there was a school, I'm not going to be able to nail down the area, I believe it was in the Midwest. During the time that they were starting up Alice, they were also doing a food drive at the same time. And those two coming together got confused that they were training people to throw cans of soup at people. And the fact that that's all it was, that once someone comes in, all we're going to do is we're going to pick up this hard object and throw it at people. That's not it. I hope that you guys have heard me say, like, the biggest thing that I want is if you can evacuate, if you can get out, I want you to get out. If the ability to not get out is not there, if we cannot get out of the building, then we need to do a better job at barricading and holding the door and buying more time for law enforcement to get there. And worst case scenario, at the high school level, we may have to, as either teachers or as a school resource officer, law enforcement, we may have to engage with a person.
I think Patrick's going to address the next steps as far as Alice goes in terms of schedule.
I think we take questions first. And then
Yep.
I can
Okay.
answer that.
So if there's been, I won't call it criticism, but there has been some questioning of the efficacy, how effective Alice training is. What alternatives are out there to this particular protocol?
I think the biggest thing is a misconception that the word counter. I think that's the biggest thing that people see, and they wonder if are we training people to try to fight, try to engage that person on purpose, and that's not the case. That's the worst, like the last thing that we want anyone doing. It's if that's all you have for your options in the end, then okay, that's what you got to do. I don't want people staying down in a corner in a room together, because when they come in, they're all together, and it's just the casualties and the ability to be able to hit your targets way too high. It's not good. We want to spread people out, give them the opportunity, noise, distance, distraction, move. Also, some of the other ones for the counter pieces is it's going to come into understanding that what you teach at the high school is much, much different than what you teach at the middle school. What you teach at the middle school to the kids is much, much different than you're going to teach down in the elementaries. There's an age base to that, and that's where you've really got to, and I've got to really get the teachers involved about language. They talked about stranger danger in there. You don't have to say that there's an active shooter for every situation. This could be a disturbed or disgruntled employee. This could be an angry parent. This could be any plethora of things, but it does need to be a very open and honest wording, because if there's a gun involved, you need to know how the emergency is, how immediate is this, and where is the threat. Do the best we can to get out. When it comes down to talking about high school, when you talk about possibly having to fight back in a room, that's at the high school level. At the middle school, you're going to tell them to get out. Those students are not that large, not big, and you're going to just ask them to get out. It's still the same thing in the high school. I'd rather you get out and give us more time to get to that person, but if you have no other options, that may be what your option is. Elementary, we need to do a better job of barricading. Be ready to barricade. Look around your classroom as a teacher. How can I do this? What can be different? I think that was the biggest thing I saw from the teachers was it wasn't so much like that they were scared or that this was overwhelming. The majority was it was empowering. It was, you know what? We now have an answer to this. We have the ability to think through this on our own, and we can do as we see fit with whatever situation is handed to us. Barricade may be the best one. It could be evacuate where your room is located, depending on where the threat is. I think they were very much empowered by this. I think the biggest thing is when people get caught on that word counter, what does that mean? And then not understanding or recognizing that how you roll it out is completely different in different age groups.
Any comment?
Yeah, I just, thanks. I think it was very clear what you said. So thank you for that. And I guess maybe this falls into some of the next steps. I'm just trying to understand. So you did a training to bring it here, just so I have an idea. I mean, is it multiple days? What kind of training is involved in terms of time?
So for the middle school and the high school, the teachers right now, there's approximately 120 teachers that have had the 45-minute presentation, as well as they've been walked through scenarios. So they're trained. From going forward, it would actually be doing the presentation for the elementary levels and anyone that I've missed above and getting them trained on that stuff, and then the scenarios would come later. Scenarios are, you want to have a decent size grouping so that it's worth it for them. Right now we're actually fairly well trained. It's more so that we need to make sure that we have this presented to the right people, and then we open it to questions for the parents. I would expect that we probably do, we spoke about 3 to 4 open nights where they can come in and ask questions about it so they could have a better understanding of it.
Thanks.
Yep. I think Patrick's going to go through the schedule of how the training will roll out. But I just have a question. Maybe it's just an observation that goes beyond. I mean, what you present with Alice is once there's an event occurring inside the building, and I hope that as we as a school district, we as a community, the RSU1 community, moves forward with this, we're also cognizant of opportunities to identify potential risk and threat before it gets into the building. That's why I think things like the kinds of thing that Addie's involved in is very appropriate to this discussion. And I know Sheriff Mary's been concerned and has been vocal on this as well. I mean, these are situations that arise within the community that to some extent are identifiable, to some extent they aren't. And they manifest themselves in many ways. Unfortunately, some of those ways are violence in the school. But I just wonder, and it does fall outside of the specific protocol, obviously, but if you could just comment on that. I mean, to what extent are we working with other area agencies and resources to try to, again, identify the risk and the threat as it might occur in the community?
I think one of the things that's come out is the see something, say something. That's been really good. Also, one thing that I've kind of blown by with this is that I know you meant literally outside the school and well beyond, like well before, but the other piece to that is you can still put the school in lockdown and not allow anybody out if you don't know where the threat is, but you know that it could be imminent. That's still a step that you don't lose. So it builds off lockdown. But talking about the agencies, I'm lucky to work in Bath, where I have a great department who's good at communicating top to bottom on all shifts. Also with the county, Saginaw County is great. The communication with those officers as well, they all have my cell phone. It's immediate. It's not I'm waiting till the end of the weekend and I find out we had a situation. The deputies are quick to call me and to ask, how well do you know this student? What do you know about this student? What would best help this student? Those communications are free and flowing. Tom Stanton over in Brunswick, John Roma at the high school, Tom's in the middle school. I know both of them. They both, same thing. It's an open flow of communication. Same with Mount Ararat. School resource officers are very good about talking back and forth. Lucky to be in this district that I'm in because it's all around. The teachers, school counselors. It's when they can say something and they can speak to me, they very more than helpful. I think that right now, what we have going for us is a wide variety of communication between all agencies. I don't feel like the walls are there that maybe have been there in the past. I think it's more so that we would rather speak up and have a group conversation than be the last one to speak up and say, yeah, maybe I could have seen this coming. I don't think that's going on right now. I think it's very much so, hey, do you know this kid? And having just an open conversation saying, yeah, this is what I know about him. And trying to put that all into the same pool, if that makes sense.
Do you see, obviously that's great with the communications, that's paramount. Moving ahead, is there any, with this concept, is there any challenge you see that we still need to overcome, or is it just a matter of working it through the whole system, or is there, just wonder if there's anything outstanding that you thought, well, we do have a challenge here we have to work through?
I think the challenge we have next is communication and conversation of what this is, and not what
it's
it's
the community
and not what it's assumed to be. That's the biggest thing, and having a conversation about that, and also having a conversation about how it looks differently at each age group. I think that's a conversation those are what we have for hurdles coming.
Okay.
And not that they're major hurdles, but I do know that they're.
But that's what you're looking out for.
Mhm.
Okay.
Anybody in the community out there has any questions of Chuck at this point? Yep, Deborah.
I'm wondering how you relay all this to the students. How does the little guy, in the classroom know the best way to react?
You mean the student, correct?
The students, correct?
So, there's a little bit different levels, but I'm gonna start with the high school. The way that they've done it in Brunswick is that they had a baseline script that each teacher had, and when you practice your lockdown and you go into lockdown, you talk over your script. You say, if we were in lockdown right now and this was to be read over the intercom, and you say what was read over the intercom, you start to kind of scenario play with the students, and you say, if this was said to be down in the art wing, would we have time to get out? Do we have time to evacuate right now? And then let the students talk, and you'd say yes or no, and if they believe no, you talk about barricading. If they believe yes, you talk about your evacuation points. You talk about how would we get out. And you just slowly start to incorporate that stuff into your first couple lockdowns after, and then you start to work on, okay, now we go on a school base, this is our scenario, and you read over the intercom. And we want you to respond accordingly how you would in an emergency situation. And then that way you'd have probably a third of your school, maybe probably a little less, a quarter, may lock down, but then a solid 3/4 is going to evacuate. And they would get to practice that and to see where they would go. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Could you identify or just give your name?
Sure. My name is Camille Passenger from Morse. I missed, there was a lot that you covered quickly and said the piece around feeling like administratively or staff-wise that your team was trained and ready to go, but it was about rolling out to the kids, I think. And I was just curious, I understand that there was sort of more of an experiential or hands-on training with the staff at the end of the last school year. And I think you spoke about their 45-minute training.
There's a PowerPoint for 45 minutes.
So I just wondered what feedback you got from the school faculty community
So you go through the 45-minute presentation, and it's similar to this, but it has more, it's about double the length easily. And at the end of that, you go through questions, and you go through questions for each teacher. And usually that can answer quite the group's questions on certain topics, or, you know, if we're saying barricade, you know, what defines barricade? Or, I'm only one person, but how am I going to move some certain object in the room? Or they'll say, I have a door that opens out into the hallway, or I have a door opening in, and we cover both those doors and how you could barricade them differently. That's part of the questions I get a lot. Also, going through, so you're doing your evacuation points, and sometimes you'll have a teacher say, well, you know what I've noticed in fire drills, that this hallway is really cluttered, and I just want to know, do I have to go out that door, or can I go out another door? I think it's a lot of problem solving by them on that 45-minute presentation. And then when we did the drills in the school, we walked through and we did the different 3 to 4 different scenarios with the teachers, and we used what we had given them for them to be able to respond with. And a lot of it was, at first, they see, if we only do lockdown, how is this going to look? And then they build from that. Okay, now we're going to barricade, and how much success can we have? How much time can we buy? And it's really a building of empowerment, because then they start to see, wow, we can actually make this door so you really can't come into it. And the biggest thing I saw and the biggest feedback I got was that it was empowering. And even some of the teachers and some of the staff that I thought were the most on the fence and the most nervous were the most empowered by the end of it, which was really good. Now, there's always going to be some staff that get shaky during it and that have a hard time. One of them that I got to speak to that did great, she had a hard time when it started, and then at the end we had a conversation. She returned to it, and she had the most glowing review of us. And it was really just saying, you know what, although this is a hard topic, and I wish we didn't have to sit here and do this training, I feel like I now have the skills and I now have the understanding of how to better respond to this in the future. And I couldn't have asked for a better compliment.
Any other questions, comments? This is a tough skill set to learn. I mean, you guys spend hours, if not days, practicing, learning these skills, and making them more instinctive as you roll them out. And I think as we try to grasp it, that's part of the issue. Whether or not what are reasonable expectations given the length of training and that we're able to provide. I think it is important that you have placed the C, which I can't remember that, confrontation.
Counter.
That's counter.
Counter.
You place the C sort of as not the most important thing to accomplish in this protocol. That it's get away if you can. I mean, I think that's key. So.
I appreciate that sort of
Yeah.
summing up. I think that's part of what I'm sitting with, is just, how emotionally triggering some of this content can be, both for parents and for teachers, and trying to understand, given how busy and so much that a school juggles, how that training gets sort of scaffolded in, or what sort of holistic approach there is to providing either emotional support to the teachers if they need it, for what it is to make these kind of decisions, or to be a teacher at this point in time and have to be thinking of this, and then how does that translate to kids in terms of emotional support if these are very hands-on training exercises? What kinds of things come up for those students, and what's in place to respond to that following these kinds of exercises?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a quick stab at that. you know, it's unfortunate that we're talking about this tonight, that we even have to talk about it. But we also, in my opinion, have an obligation to try to make it as safe as we can for students and staff, and the community in general. So, looking at what we used to do for lockdown versus in the stats and the research about trying to evacuate and barricade, we feel is only making our students safer. And we can't control everything, we can't prevent everything. But you're right, I mean, if we had to do it over again, I mean, we did exposure to training at the end of last year, and I think for the majority of our staff, it went well. But everybody has a different background, everybody has a different experience. And so, yes, we could have, and we probably should have offered some type of, service counseling to people that want to talk about it further. We did after the fact, but we could have been more proactive. So as we do it with new staff, and again, we were trying to be sensitive to pre-K to 5, is try to bite this off in small chunks as well. So we do realize it's sensitive, and that we have a lot of responsibilities as educators, and we're not experts in this field. That's why we have this close relationship with the PD. So we're going to, our plan, I mean, after more discussion, and if the board, is comfortable with us moving in this direction, we'll have parent nights, as Chuck talked about, and we'll have scripts with students. And so we want to take our time. There's no rush on this. And as well as if after school, for example, we do some more drills about, what are we going to use to barricade, and just some things without students around, is just to try to get our own staff more comfortable with these scenarios, and hopefully we never have to use it. But it is something that I feel is an obligation for the safety of our schools.
Thanks, Patrick. Any other, Julie?
Can I just say, and Eric may want to chime in, we went through the training with our staff, and I think before I went through the scenarios, there were a lot more questions, and I don't know how we could portray to the public what the scenarios actually are, but I think after going through them, it was very eye-opening. And like Patrick said, it's too bad we have to do this, but I think most of the staff felt that we did have to do it, or a lot of the staff felt like, well, at least we have more knowledge. And I think that was, as educators also, they liked having that knowledge of what could be versus what it has been. And so I think it was an eye-opening experience, and we know more about how moving forward, if we do move forward with it, how to provide resources and what we need to do. But I think if anything else, the scenarios were just very eye-opening for everybody. And I think it would be hard for a lot of teachers right now if you said, well, we might just go back to lockdown, because we experienced in a scenario what happens in a lockdown, and it's eye-opening.
I think just to add to that a little bit, at the high school, we had about 65 staff go through it. We saw the range of reaction to these pretty significant scenarios that were put in front of people. And so we kind of see the percentage of what that would be, and then apply that to 600 students, high schoolers, teenagers, right? And so now we can see a little bit of what supports that Patrick talked about, that we can be a little bit more proactive about offering those. And also, the training won't be that level of intensity that we had with our faculty. It'll be much more walking through the scenarios, and then this is going to happen, and then we won't have it'll be much less realistic.
And I certainly want to say, I think the concerns that I've heard about whether to or not to do, there's something about the flexibility, I think, that, certainly makes a lot of sense. I think it's just more about the how-tos and what supports are in place, because we look at a holistic approach as to what's going to be needed, and whether or not people feel prepared.
Thanks. Yep. Yes. Yeah.
So they did a big social media push with see something, say something, and it wasn't just from our school. That was a national push around the country, and big. So a lot of it was through. You saw some of it on Facebook. Some places actually put out advertisements on Snapchat that paid for that. Radio, biggest way was radio. Also email. I know our PD put it out on our Facebook page, and through that, I can tell you from my experience with, and from my view with the students, they'll come to me with things that they'll say, you know, this may be nothing, but I just want you to hear this. That's perfect. That's okay, and I'll look into it. And I know that I see calls on the road, because I go through all the calls, where they'll report something or someone kind of acting suspicious or just kind of off, and it's just having us look into things. And I know that I've seen at the school my volume of information go up after that. I couldn't give you a % on it, but I can tell you that I don't think the students are in any fear to tell us that if something's out of place or something seems wrong. Yeah, no, I fully do. Mr. Varney might be able to speak better than me on the staff, but.
And I would echo that it's not uncommon for a student to come into the office and say, again, this may be nothing. This didn't seem right. Very much is usually nothing, but we can just see that more as a sentiment.
Okay, I don't know if Chief Field or Sheriff Murray want to say anything at this point, or not to put you on the spot.
No,
but
I appreciate it. I just want to quickly say that it's come up a lot about the proactive moves, and Patrick alluded to a little bit of it in the beginning. You know, we've done a lot, we as PD and the RSU have done a lot of working together and seeing what we could do for better security measures, especially in our younger schools, the elementary schools. You know, for example, I go once a week to Dyke in full uniform, and they look at me, make me ID myself, don't buzz me in until they see who I am. I wear a name tag, I sign in, you know, and it's mostly obvious who it is, but, you know, which I think is great. I have no problem with that. There's a lot of proactive stuff with the Alliance with Jamie and Addie, and the sheriff and I are on that, and Chuck and many others are working towards mental health, you know, the youth mental health training. I think it's really very proactive, and those type of things. So I think there's a lot of that happening before we get to this. This is kind of it'll probably, I'm thinking it'll never happen, never say never, but the point being, we're a community, and because we're a community, we all talk to each other quite often, and as Mr. Varney, everybody's alluded to, most people do come, a lot of people come to us about things, and we get that information out and make sure that we all come to the conclusion and make sure it's all safe. So.
Yeah, I would just echo that, you know, it's a multi-pronged approach, and that's what part of the see something, say something is. I mean, that's a national initiative that was put forth the Department of Homeland Security, and it has been maybe like other things need to be pushed out more as a reminder, but I think now it's become a greater part of the culture to speak up when you do see something that it just doesn't seem right, out of place, and that's just one component. And then the other end of the spectrum is that if something, heaven forbid, did actually happen, how do we respond to that? And certainly law enforcement has their whole level of training and how they respond. This is someplace in between there is what the school community can do to prepare their staff and students to respond to that. But there's a whole lot of work that can be done in the front end. And again, it is through various initiatives, including, you know, early identification and early screening for mental health concerns. And again, that goes back to see something, say something. I think that's one of the key components of the mental health first aid. If you see something, you say something, you try to direct the individual to services and whatnot. And so again, it's multifaceted, multi-pronged
Thank you. Thanks. I mean, the plan, the rollout of this, the plan is to focus on BMS and Morse at this point, and to use that experience to help us understand how to present this successfully to the younger children in our district at the elementary level. But we will eventually we'll get around to every building in the district. Any other comments or any other questions from folks? Okay, if not, I mean, again, we will, as a board, we're going to revisit this. You know, we have, I don't think we're going to push this off for very long, obviously, but there is if you go away and have questions, and the public as well, if you come back to us with some additional questions and concerns, we'd be more than glad to hear you out on those. I think, as Patrick noted, the plan on implementation would involve notification of parents for sure, and scripting, and work with the kids before the material is presented and after the material is presented to provide those supports that perhaps we overlooked the first time we tried this training. So, okay, thanks very much, John, and thank everyone who contributed. We appreciate it. Okay, then we'll move on to item 9.0, committee reports. Patrick, 9.1, building update.
For those of you that were here just for that presentation, you can leave. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. That's all right.
Well done, Chuck.
So next item we have is just update on building project, and I don't have a formal report from Crooker. I will tomorrow morning, so I will forward that to you. But basically, we continue to blast, which we feel at the central office, and we continue to clear the site. And so we're making good progress. We're on target. A couple updates. We do have a meeting on Wednesday with the Department of Education for them to review our final plans for the school. There still can be some tweaking done, but it's come to a point where we've got to get their approval. We are going to put out a notice to general contractors for requests for qualifications probably on November 21st. And then the bidding documents will go out no earlier than January 3rd with notice to proceed anticipated March 2019 is when the actual construction would start. And you saw a report in your backup, hopefully, from Leslie Manning, who is our fundraising person. And we're at $512,000 towards our fundraising goal of $700,000 for the new building. And we do have a couple, I would say, bigger asks that are out there right now. So I'm hopeful in the next couple of weeks that 512 will get a little bit bigger. So, and then at some point, we will get down to bricks and seats in the auditorium, and what some might consider some of those smaller items that people could contribute to if they like in this building. So I don't know if you have any questions about building committee.
Any questions from the board? No? Things are chugging along for sure. Okay, item 9.2, Katie. Curriculum assessment and instruction update.
Okay, when I grow up, I want to be like Addie. That's the first thing I want to say. Okay, so I have a couple brief updates. The first is For our October Professional Development Day, I just wanted to report that the board that the technology department took us all to the Actum Computer Conference in Augusta. And I think people really enjoyed it and learned a lot. I know I did. There were some really good speakers and some great sessions, and I know that the tech committee that I attend just went over the surveys from staff of how they enjoyed the day, and it was almost a majority of positive results, and people being able to state how they were going to implement what they had learned in their classrooms. So thank you for agreeing to help us get there with the transportation funding and professional development funding for that. That was great. Our plan for, normally our professional development days are a little bit more spread out, but this year, because voting day is happening in November, we actually have our fourth professional development day of 5 next week. So it's next Tuesday, because I think it's BMS and Phippsburg are both voting facilities, and so we had to have a PD day that day. We have some great plans on that day as well. Most of the schools are working on their building goals that they're required to set every year. They'll be doing some proficiency-based assessment and curriculum work, and also elementary teachers will be working on some of the 3 initiatives I've talked to you about, our literacy reading focus for this year, our science, next generation science standard unit focus, as well as our response to intervention behavior initiative. So they're choosing from work time on those topics. At Morse, Eric did a great job of securing 2 experts on assessment from the University of Southern Maine who just published a book, and they're going to be presenting to Morse and helping us learn further about assessment, which is great. So thank you for that, Eric. Let's see. Next, our final professional development day, just so all of you know, is not till March, so I'll be reporting on that then. I wanted to remind the board as well that in the budget last year, we increased our gifted and talented funds just slightly to be able to start a new program, which we've labeled the GATE Days program, and it's taking 4th and 5th grade identified gifted and talented students from our elementary schools, bringing them to BMS once a month for an in-depth inquiry-based program that is taught by our 3 GT teachers with the theme of the brain for the whole year. And so this is modeled off an approach that we sort of studied a little bit last year as a group that goes on in a couple of different districts that's really successful. And the purpose behind the program is to basically increase community among that group of students. Also, to help them with the transition to the middle school approach, because it's taking place at the middle school. I unfortunately had other things that day, so I couldn't attend, but Mr. Kovacs told me that they enjoyed the day, but the best part was getting to get lunch on trays in the big cafeteria. So we'll get there with the academics. No, but they their feedback at the end of the day was that, why can't this happen more often? So that's great. So more to come on that, and I plan to go to the next one, so I'll be able to talk in more detail.
That's a full day, Captain?
Full day. Full day. They're all bused from their elementaries to BMS, stay all day, and then head out at the end of the day. And my final update before PBL is, I've kept you just alerted to how many homeless students we have identified throughout the year last year. We ended last year with about 36 students, and obviously folks transition in and out of the program, thankfully. Right now we're at 11, which is about where we were last year, because the scales seem to tip a little bit higher as it gets colder, and people need to transition from different places that they're staying right now. And then finally, PBL, which we've talked a lot about this past year. I just wanted to let you know a couple of things that have been happening. First of all, the vision statement that we talked about, I think the last 2 meetings, you'll notice it's posted on the internet, our website as promised, along with a letter from myself for families. That also did go home or is about to go home in newsletters, depending on when school newsletters go out. So that will go out in that fashion as well to families. The graduation policy, I've talked both with Mr. Varney and Ms. Kenny about different edits that are taking, that we need to do, basically make to the graduation policy to merge the old credit one with some of the components that we're keeping from PBL while the diploma won't be different. And I think the biggest and most exciting part is there were a lot of advances and benefits for CTE students in the new PBL diploma policy. And we would really like to keep a lot of those benefits while still going back to the old credit system. And so that's what we're trying to do right now. So I don't have a draft for you yet because I think we're getting creative in some really good ways that you'll be happy about. So it will be coming shortly. Okay. The first progress report with the new system at the middle school went home. And as of this afternoon, when I spoke with both of our middle school principals, they had not heard from any families about that. So that's a good thing. Hopefully it means that the progress report, while different, was not the hardest to understand and people were able to sort of digest it. That's not to say that there haven't been some bumps in the road that I just want to address while we're together and how we've dealt with them. Because with any new system, just like when it was rolled out at the high school, I know I have been told about different things that JP would address in his newsletters or whatnot as the rollout happened and things needed to be taken care of. So far, we have heard from 2 parents at Woolwich and 4 parents total at BMS with sort of different specific concerns. And then Brandon did have 23 parents attend his question and answer session at the open house, and Jason had some folks there at his too. I don't have the number exactly for that. And their sort of biggest questions fall into these buckets, and so I'll just quickly go through them and answer them in case you all get questions about them. The first piece is that the way things look in Infinite Campus is different. And so we've had to do a lot of explaining of when you just want to answer the question of how is my student doing, where do you look? Because things, how you get used to clicking on certain things in whatever technology you're in. And so one thing we're doing to address that is Matt Fry-Davis, who helps us with a lot of this, is actually putting together a guide with screenshots that's going to be very parent-friendly, that allows people to know exactly what they can do to see how their students are doing. I am kicking myself right now because I wish we had thought of that, the committee had thought of that at the end of last year, so we could have started the year cleanly with that guide in place. But, what's the expression? Hindsight is, what I'm talking about. Okay. The other sort of questions that we come across almost every time we talk about things related to PBL, even though we really fall very much in the middle of the system, is why are we doing all of this? I know we've talked about this as a group many times, and so just re-clarifying with families now that they're actually seeing in action the purpose of it, that allows more specific feedback rather than an average grade for just a class, I think has been really helpful. I know I spoke with a parent today about just that, and it was a great conversation. I think another piece is students do a great job at the middle school level now, because teachers really have them on top of this of checking how they are doing in IC. And so us being better about training students in what to look for in the new system, I think is going to be something we need to focus on more. I would really like to think about how to get more feedback on a broader level, and so it was suggested that possibly a survey could be helpful. And so Brandon and I were thinking that probably after the first report card, we'd reach out to families digitally with a survey to get feedback, and to students as well, to see further areas that we can address. But those were some of the main concerns so far. I don't know if anybody has questions. Those are my main updates for tonight.
Anybody on the board have a question? Lou?
Just so there was a new progress report. How is this progress report different? I mean, because you went to what this year? You're not doing letter grades, is that right?
Yeah, so instead of 0 to 100, it's exceeding, attaining, developing, and beginning. So that's one big difference.
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah. And there is like a guide on each report, so you know exactly
What it means.
And then the other piece is, rather than getting a grade for, let's say, English class, you're actually, English is labeled, but then you would have grades on specific skills that you're learning about.
So there are grades, or are they numbered?
I'm saying grades, but they're letters.
There's letter.
It's exceeding, attaining,
Oh, that's
how
what
much
the
you've
letters are.
mastered the skills.
That's
Yes.
what the letters are. Okay.
Yep.
Exceeding, maintaining. Okay.
So it's actually no different than what we do at the elementary school. So the folks who probably, I'm just guessing, it would be hardest if you're a 7th or 8th grade family, because you went from the old elementary system and then had at least 1 year or 2 of the new system, and are now actually going back to the old way. Because that's actually very much how the elementary report card is set up. So we purposely, once we get through a lot of these sort of transitional bumps, it will make a lot of sense, hopefully, for, let's say, a 5th grade family who has no student higher than 5th grade, and next year it won't look very different than they've been used to seeing since kindergarten, essentially. It's supposed to be helpful in that it's continuous K through 8 until the high school level, where it's not appropriate in the same way to do it that way for college and career and everything we've discussed in the past.
So do we foresee any? Because the way it was, at least my perception, I don't know if how you perceived it with your kids, just that when they were written like A, B, C in middle school was kind of the prep for high school.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of got a feel for it. So are we foreseeing any transitional then going from 8th grade, where some of these kids then have never seen a letter grade, letter meaning A, B, C, and then jump into high school? Is there, I don't know,
Yeah,
I'm just curious, I don't know.
I'm guessing that part of our freshman programming will have to be,
Explaining.
probably not this next year, but in a year when students are used to the new system, getting them used to which sounds a little funny to us, what 0 to 100 means, but we will have to teach them eventually.
We're now raising a generation that
Right.
doesn't know what that is.
Right.
Even if maybe
Yep.
the parents do.
That will be something that
so
Eric
we're
and I
gonna
need
have
to cover.
Well, this is what you're working for now, so I'm just wondering, we'll have to have
Yeah.
something in place. Okay.
It's a great point. Any other thoughts?
Any other questions? I wonder, do you think parents know what questions to ask? I mean, looking.
No,
and I
that's,
don't see
yeah.
that in a critical way.
No, I
That's
think
true.
that's a great point. Even when I try to explain it in the most non-education way possible, I know I still confuse people. And so I actually think that until we get at least a year or 2 through this, it's going to be confusing to people, and they won't even know what their questions are until they come across them. And that's really why I want to wait at least until the first report card to send out a survey to get any kind of feedback, because I'm not even sure that some families will be sure what their questions or their feedback even is at this point.
Yeah, I just wonder whether that's why you haven't heard,
Yeah,
you know.
I'm
from-
sure it's
from
part of it.
parents, that
Yeah.
folks are just not sure, you know, what questions to
Absolutely.
ask at this point. So
Mhm.
what do we, I mean, obviously it's a process of continuous
Continuous communication.
communication
Mhm.
and working with parents as well as with the kids to
Correct.
to convey what this system is.
That's our plan right now. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Don't go away yet. Any other questions? No? Okay, now you can go away. Thank you. Thanks, Katie. Okay, 10.0 Superintendent's Report.
Just to build on one thing Katie mentioned, we did have that technology conference, and we sent over 250 staff there, so we were very well represented. And we had 11 staff members that presented that day, and that's not always an easy thing because they're used to talking with students every single day, and so it's a little nerve-wracking, and I really appreciated their courage to do those presentations. And just to give you an idea, teaching coding, using Google Suite, using drones, creating maker spaces, and 3D printing across the curriculum were just some things that were the conference focus areas. Thank you to the board for 2 of our major outdoor learning experiences concluded this fall with the Ferry Beach Ecology School and the FLOW program. And I sent you today Lawrence Kovac's blog so that you could see the pictures and see the write-ups. And the focuses this year, Jackie McKeon's here actually from BMS, and you know, art was a big focus this year, science obviously, growth mindset, and also just the life lessons that they learn when they're at FLOW. Writing for Focus program, you heard about that last year, where we have the bikes in the morning and in the afternoon at BMS, and that is up to, I think, 40 participants now between the AM and the PM that are riding with a couple of our staff, which is great. Athletics for the fall, just some highlights. Our golf team went 10-0, undefeated during the regular season. Football and boys and girls soccer qualified for the postseason, and boys cross country finished second in the KVACs, and the girls finished third. Just a FYI, I think this is very healthy for us. Every year we have student teachers and we have interns, and this year we have 2 student teachers from the University of Maine system and 5 interns from Bowdoin College. And you know, we learn from them, and hopefully they learn from us at the same time, so it's a very positive thing. Alan and I last week went to the Maine School Management Conference, and Alan, I don't know if you want to chime in at all, but conferences were about anything from security to negotiations to instructional programs that are going on across the state. And Alan, I'll just mention one more thing here, and then if you want to add anything. But last thing, I would just like to congratulate our students at Morse that take AP exams, and I'm just going to run through this real quick, but we continue to do very well on AP exams. We had 23 students that earned AP Scholar designations. We had 4 who earned AP Scholar with distinction by earning an average score of 3.5 or greater on all exams. And for those of you that don't know, it's a 1 through 5, you know, for those tests. We had 7 students earn an AP Scholar with honor award by earning an average of a score of 3 or higher on their exams. And we had 1 national AP Scholar who earned an average score of 4.5 on all exams. So congratulations to those motivated, hardworking students and teachers for the preparation and for their performance on AP exams. Alan, did you want to add anything?
Found it to be a very worthwhile conference. Every period has several different subjects, and obviously you have to pick. You can't be at 7 different places at once, or at least I haven't found how to do it. So I picked building security, which with the new high school coming up and the problems that we have today. Hiring and keeping effective employees, vaping and substance abuse prevention, how proficiency-based and customized learning procedures prepare learners for the future, suicide risk, best practices and procedures, both to prevent and respond, and high impact practices on increased student learning. And I was able to pick up materials and bring back. I dropped off some at the middle school, Mr. Ward, that you can pick up tomorrow. And I have a packet here for the high school that you can pick up after the meeting. Thanks for letting me go.
Thanks, Alan. Any questions of Patrick or Alan?
Patrick, do we have they usually do a flow presentation. Do we have a date for that yet?
December 5th at the
Is that where we're going to keep it? So yeah, December 5th at
December 5th.
Patton Free. We had a possible scheduling conflict, but I think we're going to go with December 5th.
Yeah,
Okay.
actually the concert is the 6th.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
Okay, any other questions of Patrick or Alan? No? Okay, thank you. Deb, financial report.
I want to be like Addie, too. You can see they teach public speaking, I think, in the early grades now, which is wonderful. So tonight we're looking at the end of September, and we have spent $4.6 million. So we're just starting the process of the salaries, hitting the budget, because in July and August, basically it was all accrued and we didn't see that piece of it. But so 15.6%, which is right in line with last year, it's a little bit higher than last year. We were 13.72. And our revenue is in at 25%. And I just wanted to let you know that I looked at the budget versus actual for tuition. The state right now is working on tuition rates, and they won't be published until December. But looking at the student numbers for our revenue, we budgeted 131, and we have 132 students. So what we budget is the current rate. So hopefully when they set the rates, they'll be a little bit higher because we're receiving town. That's for revenues. But as far as paying tuition out, the only tuition that we pay out now is for outside placements. And so that's a big difference. We started out when we consolidated together, we had 81 tuition students, so that we were tuitioning out, and now we're down to 0 for regular ed. Morse High School, we've spent $4.2 million out of the project as of the end of September, although I have processed about $1.5 million in October already. So that brings us up to a little over $5 million that we've spent out of that project. We will be going out to bond, the final bond, the $75 million in May. And just to give you a little heads up that our first interest payment will be in the 19-20 budget year. So we'll be looking at that pretty soon.
Maybe 2020?
No, 19-20.
1920.
Fiscal year 2020. So the only other thing happening right now in the central office, as you probably all know, Rob Morse resigned. And so Anne Marie is now full-time. So so far we think that's all going to work, and we're just going to see how it all goes. Auditors are in the office this week, and that's it.
Great.
Questions?
I had a question on operation, the operation maintenance line. Is that expenditure on the expense side, is that in line with what you anticipate?
We spent a little bit more compared to last year, but that also includes the non-state funded debt service payments are in that figure as well. So that's why, David hasn't been spending all that money. Some of it is debt service payments.
Okay. So it's not of any particular concern?
No.
Okay. Any other questions on the finance report? If not, thanks, Deb. Okay, item 11.0, old business. This is an action item. We have the second reading of policy EFA, student meal accounts. Do I have a motion?
Sorry, Anita pointed out, because she's on the policy committee with me, is in the second paragraph, we should cross out in grades K to 8, that second line. See the second line, the second paragraph? Because the whole discussion, as we talked about last time, was that, that we don't want to turn away any student that needs to charge a meal, even though we don't want it to become a common practice. We want to treat all of our students, K to 12, the same. So that should just be crossed out, grades K to 8.
Okay, does everyone see that change? So, so I guess the reference then goes down to, I mean, the policy applies equally through K through 12, not distinguishing, separating out our 9th through 12th graders. Okay, so with that change, again, this is an action item. Do I have a motion to approve? Okay, motion by Bill, second by Megan.
Yes.
All in favor? Any opposed? No? You can vote down there, Hayden. So. Welcome, by the way. Okay, thank you. Item 12.0, new business. Patrick, some personnel items?
Both, just for your information, Martha Simpson has decided to retire, a foreign language teacher at the high school, and I'd like to thank her for 21 years of service to the district. And the next one is a resignation. Charlie Fear, who's a science teacher at the middle school, and Charlie has an opportunity to go and work for Chewonki, and we have such a good relationship with Chewonki. We'll let that happen, but we're really going to we'll miss him, and he's a bright teacher that's will be missed by the district.
I know when you mentioned this before, the applications that you had for 7th through 8 were slow coming in, but is that?
Yeah, I should have mentioned, Charlie will be with us until December 21st, and we do have, I think, 2 to 3, maybe 4 applications that have come to either Brandon or central office. So we're hopeful that we'll find a quality replacement for this year. And usually when we lose somebody in the middle of a year, we reopen it in the springtime just to make sure we find the best possible candidate.
Thanks, Patrick. Item 12.2, approval, this is an action item. It's approval of the 2018-19 board goals. The board met in a workshop prior to the last board meeting and identified a set of 4 goals. This is our iteration of what that discussion was and sets those goals out. So do I have a motion to approve these goals?
So moved.
Motion by Alan, a second?
Second.
All right, I'll take Bill, second by Bill. Okay, any discussion? For those board members that participated in the workshop, does this read pretty much as we discussed? Okay, no discussion?
Is it what we want? I missed that.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of adopting the goals? Any opposed? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, item 12.3. We have to approve new programs offered at BR CTC. I don't know, do you want to talk to this, or Julie, do you want to speak to it?
Julie, chime in if I miss anything. But basically, we brought this to you for those of you that have been on the board for a couple of years. You approved it in concept, and the Department of Education needs a specific motion, a commitment that we are going to offer these programs and at what time. So in your backup, Julie provides a nice synopsis of the programs and also which ones she's recommending to do first. So it's cosmetology in the first year of the new building, and then the next year will be criminal justice. And the way that the new funding works for CTE is that it's not coming from our budget. It's something that if we do the paperwork and we submit for a new program, the funding will be there as part of this. So it's exciting. The school's going to have spaces for both of these new programs. So Julie, anything you want to add?
Yeah, it's mostly, it seems crazy because it's so early. It's with a new funding formula in order to, for them to assign our funding for 2020. This needs to be approved by November 1st, fully with letters to the commissioner. So it's all, we receive all the funding 100% or based on what they allocate for that, which usually we've seen so far is going to cover all of our costs. So we feel like it's a really good opportunity. They recommend
Thanks, thanks, Julie. Lou has a Lou, do you want to
Yeah,
give us the motion
sure.
on this?
I move that we approve Bath Regional Career and Technical Center to offer a cosmetology program in year 2020, 2021, and criminal justice beginning in year 2021, 2022.
Okay, so we have a motion by Lou. Do I have a second? A second by Megan. Okay, any discussion? No? All in favor? Any opposed? No, thank you. Okay, item 12.4, we have first reading on 3 policies: DMA, cash management for federal funds, DKC, expense authorization and reimbursement, and JLDBA, suicide prevention, intervention, and response. Does anyone have any questions on those policies? This is first reading.
I just want to understand, what are these, like the cash management for, is this something we didn't have a policy before, or?
Right, we don't have these policies currently, and like, for example, special ed, when we have financial audits, and, we have an audit going on right now in the district, and these are 2 that, we should have. So cash management for federal funds, because we do receive that
Right,
through special
right.
ed mostly, and then expense authorization and reimbursement. So
So we didn't have an actual
right.
policy, we just handled them, but
Right.
it's been recommended we do
Yeah.
this. Okay.
Yep. And then the last one, the suicide prevention, is just updating
that's
the
it.
language and
That's
some of our
right.
practices.
No, thank you.
So back on the cash management for federal funds, who is the federal program director? Is that?
Well, we have different, like Justin is for local entitlement, his program's actually being audited, and like Lou said, we do this, we just didn't have it in writing.
Okay. So when they,
Required, or suggested it was a good idea to have it in writing, and this same thing would work with case, Title I, Title II. any
Oh, right,
federal
yeah.
okay. I have a question on the expense authorization and reimbursement proposal as well, the DKC. Under authorization, it talks about employee expenses to be reimbursed must be pre-approved by the employee's supervising administrator. And I just wonder, what do you as business manager, do you have any input into this?
There's a form that a teacher or a staff member completes if they go into a conference and that sort of thing, and their building administrator signs off on that, approves that. So there's limits, the meals, there's limits for lodging, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but where does the money, who controls the money in this case?
Well, it's in the budget. Staff
Okay, so it's against a budgeted item.
It's against the budgeted item.
Yeah. So,
The actual expense being charged there is approved by the building administrator.
I guess for me, it's just a question of making sure that that all this balances, that the employer, in this case, the supervisor, is not authorizing an expenditure and there's no money against it, you know what I mean? So I just wonder where you check off on this, I guess is the question.
Also, principals all check in with me about staff development things, and I have to approve it before it goes through all the piece.
Yeah.
There's multiple steps of approval.
Okay. Well, we look to Deb to make sure that the money's there and it's spent, according to the budget plan. So I'm just wondering where your checkoff comes on this process. So it does.
Yeah, it's a combination of eyes from building administrator, Katie, Sal.
Yeah.
Some items are charged to grants, so we watch that.
Okay. Okay. And then I just had a comment, I think it's a drafting issue with JLDBA, the suicide prevention. I mean, there have been extensive drafts here, or changes, I should say. And in the first paragraph, there's a phrase, the board directs that, and it seems to be a dangling phrase at this point. I don't know what
Yeah,
it
because the actual list is
is gone.
Right.
So it doesn't really segue to the next paragraph. So if you could just take a look at that from
Refer it to literacy.
a wordsmithing's.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments? Again, this is the first reading, so we'll take these up at our next meeting for action. Item 13.0, this is our second public session. Does anyone have any comments to offer? Regardless, no? Okay, thank you. 14.0, set the next meeting date and location. 14.1, the RSU board meeting. We're scheduled to meet now November 19th at Dyke Newell at 6 o'clock. It's Thanksgiving week, and we appreciate everyone making themselves available for that. So, very good. And 14.2, we are going to go into executive session. So I need a motion for that. Do I have a motion to go into executive session? Second by Alan. Or motion by Alan, second by Bill. All in favor? Any opposed? No? Okay, thank you. And like I said, we will be coming back to regular session, but we're not going to be taking up any other business at that point. Thank you.
We're going to go down this hallway to a conference room.